For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins, an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and canoed from source to sea, both the entire Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. All right, here we go, episode 51 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Doug Young is on the podcast today. Doug and I just got off of a trip up in Yukon Territory, Canada, and what a trip it was. So we're breaking down that trip mostly here on this podcast. If this trip sounds like something that interests you and you'd like to join us on a future one, maybe a smaller one, maybe one just as big as this, buffaloroamer.com is the place to check out, or you can email me at buffaloroamer@yahoo.com. Okay, without further ado, here we go. Doug Young and the Yukon River on Buffalo Roamer Outdoors, episode 51. Doug, man, it's good to reconnect. Takes me right back already up to the Yukon. We just got off the river, 2 weeks ago now? 2 weeks and change?
I suppose that's it. It feels like quite a bit longer. Thanks for calling me up to do this, Will.
Yeah, you bet. I'm glad to do it. Happy to talk about it and talk about wilderness and the trip, and yeah, should be a lot of fun. How have things been for you since getting off the Yukon, which we just did, as we mentioned, 2.5 weeks ago? It was an 8-day, 7-night trip, Buffalo Roamer guided, hosted adventure. And yeah, how have things been since you're back in San Diego off the river?
Yeah, so I'll spare your listeners most of the details, but just incredibly busy. I was finishing steps on purchasing a house literally right before we got on the river. I was out in a cab in Whitehorse, Canada, trying to find ice, and I get a call from the mortgage company. So getting out on the river after dealing with that was absolutely incredible. And, it's just one of those things where you get out there and all of a sudden you snap your fingers and you're out in the wilderness. That was one of the most amazing parts about this trip that you put together, was just flying into Whitehorse. You're still pretty much in a big city. It's got everything you need, but you get on the river for 15 minutes and everything just fades behind you. So getting back to San Diego, I've been thrust back in the thick of it. We were just talking about moving, so not nearly as joyous as what we had going a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's funny how quickly you, after any length of trip, really, but just after being in the woods, how quickly it all just comes right back. Honestly, I swear it's like a day or two, and it's like, this long, huge trip, this 8-day trip that I'd been planning for a year, more or less, and like stressed about beforehand, like worried about work and, how things will run when you're away and blah, blah, blah. And then you're out there and you forget about it all. It doesn't matter. And then you come back and you're like, why was I worried? Everything's fine. People can handle business for a few days without me,
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about these trips, is the way that your perception of time seems to change. You're out there and you're having this incredible adventure, really soaking up the hours on the river, fishing. It feels like there's more hours in the day, and you get back and people hardly notice that you've been gone. I took 7 days off of work and went to Canada, one of the furthest north places I've ever been, out in the woods with my buddies, and people are like, oh yeah, there were a couple of emails, but we took care of them. Don't worry about it. And it's just one less reason to stop yourself from going, when you have to remember it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And and it's generally speaking, it's always worth it. I always look back and I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad I did that. In retrospect, what is it? Hindsight's 2020. It's like, oh yeah, totally. I've never been disappointed about, going to the backcountry, doing a trip, going to the woods, going on a hike, going fishing, going and doing something. It's never, you're never upset about it. So.
Literally never upset about it.
No.
You have all this anticipation. There's a million reasons not to go. Camping, I mean, you have all the stuff. There's a lot of logistics. You're nervous you're going to forget something. And oh my gosh, I have to bring water for 3 days. How am I going to do that? That seems like a hassle. And then you come back and you think, that's the best way that I could have ever spent 3 days of my life.
Exactly.
Like, those are memories of the lifetime. Whereas I would have been home, puttering around, of course there's great home, but at the same time, I wouldn't have remembered that week of my life had it not been for going up to the woods with you guys.
Wow. That's a great point. And I think that's a great way to put it right there. That's a succinct, hit the nail on the head that, yeah, if we wouldn't have done this trip, it would have been just another day. Yeah. You wouldn't have remembered this week, but we went up there and made memories that should last a lifetime,
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
What was your connection to camping and the outdoors, I guess, before this trip? Because to give a little bit of the lay of the land, so it was you, Anton, and Michael, and myself. So there was 4 of us on this trip up to the Yukon that I had put together. And we had all been to a summer camp in northern Wisconsin as, I guess I would say, children for me, kids, 16-year-olds. And you led this canoe trip for us, which was, you were 25, you said? Is that right?
I was 25. I had you 3 and 3 more 16, 17-year-old boys, young men, on Saskatchewan for 30 days doing some whitewater paddling. So that was the biggest trip that I ever led. But previous to that, I had worked at camp for, 5 or 6 years and also been a camper. So that trip that you guys went on, that I led, the Canuck in camp terminology, I had done the same trip when I was a camper. So that was really my foundation of getting out in the woods. My parents took me camping and stuff, but 2-day car camping things, but enough to whet my appetite. But really going to Camp Manitowish in northern Wisconsin and Boulder Junction was where I fell in love and, really sealed my fate as someone who is going to always be sort of want to get out there.
Love it. Yeah, and me as well. So we met at this place. This was 14 years ago when you were 25. I was 16, I think, something like that, 16, 17. Hadn't really talked at all since then. I don't think really at all, maybe an email or 2. And Anton, who was one of the guys on the trip, had heard that I was organizing this Buffalo Roamer guided trip up there, and he wanted to do it, was interested in doing it, so signed up, and then got you guys rallied on for the trip as well. What was it like for you? Was it like a big jump to go 8 days into the Yukon? Was it like no big deal? Was it what was your relationship with the woods between and camping between Manitowish, the end of camp, and leading that trip that we went on 14 years ago, and the start of the Yukon?
Yeah, so I, in the subsequent 14 years after I led that trip, I hadn't talked to Will Collins one time, I think. Definitely not voice to voice, maybe an email or a text, but really not. And so the fact that I hadn't seen you or talked to you in 14 years, and then all of a sudden signed up for this trip that you were leading, that you were putting together up in the Yukon for 8 days in grizzly bear country, I was like, it's pretty incredible the amount of trust that I had, because I didn't think twice about it. I was like, oh yeah, I know what Will's been up to just through the grapevine with Buffalo Roamer and with, your incredible trips in the Yukon as well as on the Mississippi. So I was like, this guy's got it. I want to say this kid's got it, but still I'll always think of you a little bit like that. This guy's got it. So I'm just going to go up there. But because I was in the midst of this move that I was mentioning earlier, I was actually staying at my parents' house during escrow on this house. So it was like packing for summer camp all over again. It was bizarre. I was riding around to REI. My mom didn't have to drive me, but I was riding around to REI, picking up little last minute stuff, making sure I had solid rain gear, a couple of the little gear items that you suggested that were great tricks for the trail. And yeah, I mean, it was nervous because you don't want to forget something, right? You want to have the right gear out there. But at the same time, it was just so exciting because I haven't done anything in the wilderness in those past 14 years other than a few backpacking trips, but I was never further than 20 miles from a car, you know? And this was way out there. So I was nervous and excited, and I just knew that it was going to be so good for me to get back out there.
Awesome, man. I love it. Yeah, it's funny packing for these trips because it seems like you don't need much, and you really don't. Usually you always end up overpacking anyway, but that's a good thing because it's better to be safe than sorry, at least from my perspective. But yeah, it's just, running around, getting all this last minute stuff. When I was in Whitehorse, I got in there the day before you guys, and I had like grocery shopping, like organizing all this gear. I was like, I walked back and forth, paced Whitehorse from city end to city end like 3 times that day, 4 times. It's funny, like frantically trying to pack all your stuff. And then once you get out there, you're like, oh, we don't have a water container, which is one of the things that we, I think one of the only few things that we didn't have that maybe we were supposed to, didn't get packed in from our outfitter. And it's like, oh, no big deal. Let's use the coffee pot or whatever. You know, it's like you always need less than you think.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how you'll be packing and I'll be pouring over my list these last minute things that I don't want to forget. And then the minute you get in the boats and paddle away from shore, it's like, well, we got what we got. So we're going to be fine because we've done this 100 times and we know that we're going to be fine as long as we got some food, some tents, and some rain gear and bear spray for this trip. I feel like I'm insinuating that we ran into a bunch of bears, which we didn't. So if someone's listening and wanting a big bear story, fortunately or unfortunately, we didn't see any bears. But we had everything we needed and then some. So, it was perfect. I'm glad you made all those trips through town to secure that food because we ate good out there.
Yeah, it was great, man. And it's such a funny feeling too. And one of the best feelings, pushing off. Like, I get so giddy. I think I was telling you too, just like beforehand, like all the planning and all that, being particular. Like, I enjoy all that stuff, especially if it's doing something like this trip. Obviously, I enjoy like the logistics and thinking through all that stuff. But really, like, I just want to be on the water. So once you push off we pushed off into the river, this fast, rip-roaring, like turquoise, Arctic, glacial melt color, just rip-roaring. And once you push off into it and you're like looking back as, the city fades behind you, you're like, all right, we got everything we need. We're not taking out for the next 8 days. It's the best.
Yeah, it's one of those here we go moments because it helps remind me of the possibilities of the world. You get so caught up in your routine. I should speak for myself. I get so caught up in my routine, house to work to a soccer game I have once a week. Doing some stuff with my buddies on the weekend. But you could be paddling on the Yukon River. You could be. And if you make it happen, or you hop on a buffalo roamer trip, you can be out in the middle of nowhere in a couple of flights. And it's as easy as that. It seems so hard when you're leading up to it, but it's really as easy as that. And yeah, we just pushed out a Whitehorse and we're floating down the river. And what was it? 20 minutes later, and all signs of civilization are gone.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Pretty awesome. What was your, do you have like an overarching favorite thing, or just like, as you got back to San Diego, how do you describe it to people? Or like kind of a broad question, but I think you get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get where you're getting at, and I'm terrible at it. I don't know how to describe it to people. I say it was a great trip. I say it was beautiful. I mean, the Canadian wilderness, the canoe country up there is so amazing when you're there, but you don't summit any peaks. You don't have one epic glacier that you ski down at the end of the trip. You're out there floating on this river, and it's pine trees forever. And there's nothing that's so extraordinary that people want to see in some National Geographic photo shoot. But at the same time, the bigness of the Yukon River, the color of the water, the mountains that the red and silver mountains that flow right into the river, it's incredibly beautiful. And your eyes are, I just want to be taking videos of all this stuff, and get home and look at my videos. I'm like, shake canoe video. It's not that great, but it's all of that. It's just being out there. And for me, one of the things that's been something I think about, or that I've told you about, is the fact that we saw 4 boats the entire time. We talked to 2 people for, all of 10 sentences. Those 2 Frenchmen we saw canoeing, the 1 fisherman we saw catching a few grayling.
Yep. That
was essentially all the words that we spoke to people outside of our group for 8 days.
Yeah.
So that was just incrediable.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with all of those things. And also, there's something to be said. You're talking about, you don't have like that one epic moment. You're right, like summiting a peak, or like that one photo, or like fishing, for instance. Like if you go to Brazil on a fishing trip, like I've done, and like as stupid and I don't know, self-centered or whatever it is, but you want to come back with that picture and be like, like, check out this fish I caught. It's massive, or however it is, or check out the peak I just scaled. And yeah, you don't have that one epic photo from the canoe trips. There's a lot of amazing photos, but that doesn't diminish it necessarily. And also, I think the other caveat with that is, which I'd like to do on some of these other Buffalo Rummer trips, maybe on the Moab trip that we're going to be doing. I need to get like either a friend or a professional photographer, and just have like somebody who can actually take photos, because in some of those settings, if you have somebody who, not like with an iPhone on a food barrel, no offense to your to your photo taking ability.
That was a good setup, Will.
It was a good setup. But they can make that place just light up and just look amazing. But I'm no professional photographer, you know what I mean?
Nor am I. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't mean to downplay the beauty at all. I mean, I have some amazing sunset pictures. When we were looking out across, so the sunsets, we didn't fully get the midnight sun because it was later in the season. But one thing I've explained to people, or tried to tell stories about, is the longness of the golden hour. So it's like golden hour for 3 hours from 7 to 10 at night. And then it's sunset from 10 to 11 at night. And then it's this dusk from 11 to 1 in the morning. So it's just these elongated stretches of time. And there was one night at the north end, I believe, of Lake Labarge, where we were looking due west to where the sun set perfectly behind a couple of mountains. But there was a rainstorm across the lake, and it was just catching the glow of the sunset. So it was this brilliant orange mist that just hung out there it had to be a full hour. And of course, we're just making hot drinks by the fire and sipping a glass of whiskey, and it was just perfect.
Yeah, it was amazing. I definitely distinctly remember that. I did get a couple good photos of that, at least good for me. No pro photos, but yeah, that was so epic. Yeah, watching the sun light up the rainstorm, exactly like you were saying, just like an orange haze. Just wild. That was one of the other cool things too that sometimes I describe to people, or try to describe, is I don't know if it's just because it's such big country, or because we're on a river that's moving so fast, so you're making miles, but seeing those individual storm systems kind of boil all around you. I remember it was the same way when I was up there in 2018. We would be, we're on the river, and you see a massive storm cell, maybe like around the next ridge, which is around the next bend of river. And you're like, oh man, we're heading for that. And you're around the bend and it's just completely rainy. All your stuff could be soaked. And then you once you get into the downpour, you look a little farther and you see, oh, it looks like there's sun up around the next bend. And then you paddle, and like 10 minutes later, you've reached the next bend and it's sunny, and you look back behind you and you see the rain just downpouring, 20 feet behind you, and then it keeps getting farther. It's just wild.
Yeah, absolutely. We had that a few times on this trip. Our rainy day, it probably didn't even rain half the day, because you would just get these 30-minute chunks or 15-minute chunks, and you'd be paddling up and you'd say, okay, here we go, zip up your coat. And then the wind would hit you at the edge of the storm, and you'd break through that, and it's calm and rainy in the middle, and then you just pop out the other side. The other thing that I'm reminded of now was how one thing that was amazing about the river was high this year, so it was moving fast. I've been telling people 4 miles an hour. I don't know if that rings true for you, but let's leave that for now. And so you're just floating at 4 miles an hour. We're paddling at probably 7 miles an hour when we're moving on the river. So you're covering so much ground that you can see a mountain in the distance, and you'll get there in a couple of hours. And the mountain that you passed 3 hours ago is way behind you. Other forms of travel, whether you're flatwater canoe paddling or in a kayak where you're just doing bigger crossings, it's like you'll paddle to a point all day, and that's your landmark for the full day. Or backpacking, that can be very slow as well. So this was just like, you'll see something off in the distance, it seems like a day away, but it's really only a couple hours away, and then you're there, and oh, that was the mountain we were looking at this morning when we had breakfast. It was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think you're about spot on with that. I've been saying like 4 to 5 miles an hour with how fast my estimate is of the river flowing, but which is moving, The other funny thing is it's a couple funny things, but it's always funny how, especially as the river got larger. So we did 200 some odd miles over the 8 days, and some of that, about 30 of that, was more or less still water paddling on Lake LaBarge. And but as you got towards the big river, every time you stop, your perception of how fast the river is moving is so like out of whack when you're on it, because you're so comfortable in the boat. The canoe is like, it's like home. It feels good. You're not even worried about tipping, not even thinking about it. And then you eddy out to go to the bathroom or have lunch, and your boat whips around, and you're like, whoa, this water is cooking. And you like look out in the river and see a log floating by, and it's just, going.
Yeah. Or you see a beach or a campsite that you want to go to, and you're still probably 30 yards above it, but you're trying to get over from this middle of the river where you're 30 yards away from it to the side as well. So you're all of a sudden in, not emergency mode, but you're paddling hard all of a sudden after not really paddling that hard all day, cranking to try to make sure that you don't slip way downstream past this thing, because it's a lot of work to get up that river. So that was something that was different. I hadn't done a lot of swift water in 14 years. So getting back up to those campsites, if you slipped a little bit down past it, that was some fun paddling, let's say.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yeah. Did you have a favorite meal, or what was your overall perception of the food?
Oh, the food was great. You and I talked a bunch about why does this trip seem easier and more relaxed and more just sort of fun than Camp Manitouish trips. And I think it was because you just took advantage of the fact that we're canoe camping. Canoe camping is kind of unlike any other camping where you're really in the wilderness, but you got big old boats that you could put stuff in. So you had a cooler, and so we had burgers, the cheeseburgers, smash burgers the first night.
Yep,
we had
smash
steaks
burger
the
is key.
second night.
Michael crushed it with the smash burger aspect. I was unconvinced, but killed it.
Oh, smashed them. And then steaks the second night. So obviously those two are glorious. But the real one that I think of as real camping food that you could have cooked any day. You could have cooked it 30 days in. Was the South Indian lentil fried rice.
Love it.
That was incredible. Listeners, Will Collins can crisp the rice to perfection.
Boom.
And yeah, exactly. And so, we were getting textures, we were getting flavors from all around the world. That one is a real winner. I'm going to add that to my repertoire.
Love it. I also was loving Anton's no-bake cheesecake, which Anton created, took over, however you want to call it, captained. And, delicious. A little cheesecake to top off the night. I think that was the same meal, actually.
It was the same meal, yeah. Anton. So Anton's always been a person that you give him a mission and he's on it. And it just, thinking about that now, it's just one of those amazing things when you go on trail with a few people and everyone just finds their niche. And you get these specialists that sort of you didn't know, you would never know in the quote unquote real world what people are into. But I saw you explain it. You didn't really want to make the cheesecake after cooking that fried rice for an hour. And so you put it out there. Does anyone want to make this? And Anton just locked in and he just went to work in the laboratory and he was, we didn't have milk, of course, and it called for milk. So he was mixing coffee creamer with, the filtered water, and he whipped up something special. And that's one of the cool things is the division of responsibilities and who pops up with some amazing creation that you just don't see coming, but you can create out there no problem if you just, improvise.
Absolutely. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. I love it. And it's funny about these trips. We're getting into this part early, but it's always the same way. I say it all the time is like you go out there thinking about, the Yukon and the mountains and the grizzly and, the true wilderness. And while all of that is true and all of that is amazing and it is the reason we go, when you're telling stories or when you're remembering it, all of it usually centers around just the ridiculous stories, the ridiculous stuff, the funny and the camaraderie that is kind of built and earned from spending so much time with folks in that environment of the woods,
Yeah, it's so simple. All you have to do is get from point A to point B. That's your mission for the day. So everything else is let's have a good time doing it. Let's eat some good food. Let's, make sure that we're safe and drinking water and putting on sunblock. Other than that, it's let's have a good time with it. So there's absolutely no reason not to be silly from sun up to sundown. And I would say we accomplished that very well on this trip.
I would have to agree.
I was laughing so much the whole time just to myself that, we had a blast on the trip 14 years ago in Saskatchewan, but this one got to be R-rated. Now, this podcast is not going to get R-rated, but we got to be, fully, we were adults. We all had some stories. So it was just so funny to hang out with you guys and see what you've been up to and get to just chat with people for hours while you're canoeing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a blast. And it's one of those things, too, where you can't hide, really. You can hide maybe a day or two. You can hide your personality or your true self. But 8 days, oof, that's you really get to know somebody and you get to know, how they work and how they work under pressure and how they work, if they're tired or didn't get a good night's sleep or whatever it is. And, everybody stepped up to the plate and beyond on this trip, so it was amazing. But it's you get to know people being out there, which is a really cool and so important, but not often thought of at the forefront of the trip,
Yeah. My moment was mosquito related. So the mosquitoes up there were pretty gnarly, I gotta say. I've been out in mosquitoes. I consider myself an expert at mosquitoes.
Expert, he
but
says.
There were a few times when they got to me. You know, you're trying to set up your tent or whatever it is, with something that requires two hands, and they're just finding any little patch of skin. They're getting your ankles, they're getting your hands, they're getting that little slot between the back of your net and the back of your bug net and your sweatshirt or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, like you said, Michael immediately recognized that my mood had shifted and I was losing it a little bit. And he's like, hey, Doug, what can I do to help you, buddy? And, you know, I had like lost a steak or thought I lost a steak or something. And we were camping we were camping by that telegraph station, that old historical telegraph station. So it was tall grass. And he's like, hey, just take a deep breath. And, you know, I did. And it was, you put up my hood, adjusted my mosquito gear and, you know, got it figured out. But yeah, those moments are bound to happen. And like you said, you can't hide it.
Yeah, it's great though. And it's awesome to, not awesome, but yeah, the bugs, thinking about the bugs were bad at times. It seemed like it was always back towards our tents when we were out towards a lot of our campsites were kind of on like either a point or like at least on the river's edge, and it seemed like they weren't as bad there. But yeah, once you got into the like tent area back away from where we cooked, they're pretty gnarly.
They were. I feel like I figured it out right at the end of the trip. I had my bug game down. I knew what clothes to wear, but of course, you know, it took me a full 5 days or whatever to get my system in place.
It's key. It's super important. And also, like, of course, once you have your system in place, like you were saying, they find every way no matter what. So it's like you got your net on, but it's like, you know, just barely touched against your face, so they find the one little slot and like get you on your face through the net. You're like, you little. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and the weather. It's, you know, when I was up there looking, when I landed in Whitehorse and was looking at the weather before you guys got there. Yeah, I landed and I sent a text to the group. I was like, hey boys, bring your make sure you bring a puffy and a stocking cap. I landed and I was like, man, it is going to be so crappy the whole time. The weather said like chilly, overcast, rainy, and it ended up being great. We had the 1 day of rain where we were kind of paddling through different storms. And then I think other than that, we had the one night where we had a big storm roll through right as we were setting up camp. And that was the only night where there was like man-made structure, at least like within this century, at our site, and it was like a overhang. And literally, as we're pulling up to the to the campsite, we look over the up the river. I forget which river it was, Teslin maybe, that came in, and look up there, and we're like, oh boy, there's a storm coming down that river. And sure enough, 5-10 minutes later, it's just absolutely downpouring.
Yeah, I think that was did they call it the 30-mile wilderness? Is that what that stretch is called? Yes,
that's the end of it, I believe. Yeah.
Right. So that was our first longish day, and we were pretty tired. I think I weirdly got stronger throughout the trip. So at the beginning, the first couple of days, I was really feeling it from paddling for the first time in years, hours a day. And that was the one time that someone was in a campsite that we were aiming for. So we had to keep going. And of course, you're making miles out there, so it was no problem at all. But we pull up to this site, and we had been watching this cloud behind us coming for probably 2 hours, and it was getting closer. And it was one of those magical, perfect timings, running up, putting all your gear in the little shelter that we found, and then it just dumps on us. And we were happy and dry, and started making hot drinks and cooking dinner, and the storm went away and had a fire. It was one of those cool experiences.
It was great. Although I do think the bugs were, if I remember right, I want to say that was the worst night of bugs, because after that we were kind of huddled, but they mostly stayed under that shelter where we were cooking.
They liked the shelter. Yeah. They also knew about the shelter.
Yes, they did.
They also were happy that it was there.
Oh, funny. How about Did you have a favorite like wildernessy moment or like holy shit, I'm in the Yukon moment?
So many. I mean, that was really almost all day, every day. Just the power of the river, how wide it is, how blue it is, the colors. I guess if there's one moment, so I wasn't expecting the way that the mountains just pour right down into. It was one of those things where before I go into movies, I really try not to see any trailers if it's one that I'm really excited for. So I tried not to do a lot of research and Google images and find out, the cool places on this stretch of river. So it was sort of new to me. And the mountains are just huge and dumping right into the cliffs, right into the river. So at the north end of Lake Labarge, I just have this one mountain memory of this orange and silver mountain, with a billion pine trees leading up to it until the tree line, and then the mountain just rises above. So that section to me was one of the first really eye-opening, but it's also beautiful out there. There was no moment paddling when I got sick of just looking around and saying, lucky to be here.
I know.
Just lucky to be here.
I totally agree. Yeah. Lake Labarge was just absolutely epic. The mountains jetting into the water, everything. I remember there was one point, I think it was on the same day where we stopped at that shelter to avoid the rain, and that was the 30-mile section, which is like a known section of designated wilderness, of like a gold medal wilderness. I think they call it Canadian Heritage Wilderness or something along those lines. And you were like, oh, because we missed the campsite, we had to bust all the way through that 30 miles in an afternoon. And to give you an idea of the pace. And I remember you saying something like, oh man, I just don't want to pass all like the 30-mile stretch. It's supposed to be one of the best stretches. And while it is one of the best stretches, it's like, don't worry, man. The whole thing is epic. It's like it doesn't really change just from a designation or a line on the map. It's like, it's just epic all the way.
Right, as if we got out of the 30-mile and there was just going to be McDonald's sitting right there.
Right.
But I remember that moment. Because I was bummed about it. I was like, because that was the day where people were in our campsite. People were in the one we were aiming for, the one group we had seen the whole trip. And it's like, oh, we're blowing right through this 30-mile section that Will had talked up so much. And I said that out loud, and you turn to me and you go, it's all sick, bro. And I believe I said, that is exactly what I did to hear.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You couldn't be more right. I mean, it didn't change that's what's so amazing up there is I'm used to, I live in San Diego, I live in Southern California, and I should say the only, but most of the wildernessy places are there because they're protected. Otherwise, people are going to be there. But up in Yukon territories, the unprotected areas are still wide open because there just aren't people up there. And that was, that was my favorite thing. It was the solitude wilderness experience up there was extraordinary.
That's such a good way to put it too. And like kind of a good way to grasp it in the mind is it's like, yeah, the whole place is wilderness. There's 40,000 people, or 50,000 now maybe in all of Yukon, in the whole territory. And I don't know how big it is, but it's got to be, for some reason I want to say Vermont because it seems like a similar shape, but it's massive. It's massive. And it's, there's nobody there. And yeah, exactly. It's not like wilderness because it's protected. It's just because it's there and there's no one there.
Yeah. So there's about 50, this is one of the things you told me, and then our amazing shuttle driver, Maxine the Queen, told us 50,000 people in Yukon territories, 45,000 of which live in Whitehorse. So you get outside the city limits and there is no one out there. There's a couple of fish camps, a couple of little small First Nations villages or towns. And other than that, it's the woods and, you have free reign.
Yep, Dawson, and that's about it. Dawson's a couple thousand, and yeah, exactly. A bunch of mining stuff, and exactly, free reign, which so funny thinking about. I've still kind of been thinking about Maxine, our shuttle driver. After doing this whole trip, she tells us she's telling us all kinds of awesome stories. She was full of stories. I think it was a 2.5, 3 hour drive back, and one of which she was saying was the gold mining still going on. I knew that it was still producing, the area was still producing gold, which obviously it was famous for in the Klondike Gold Rush at the turn of the century. A massive gold rush, which kind of helped form the Yukon. But I knew that there were like commercial mines still producing gold, but I didn't realize that there, as she told us, are still individuals like you and I who go up there, have a small claim in a creek, and pan for gold during the day and make their livings during the summer, panning for gold and bringing it in. Just insane.
Will, was that an invitation? I'm ready.
Let's go, man.
Get a claim, Will. Let's go.
It's just ridiculous.
That was she was an incredible person. So lucky we got to hang out with her for a couple hours. But yeah, story about these two German guys who come every summer, and they'll start the summer, they'll go to the grocery store, and apparently in Canada they have these big peanut butter jars that are shaped like bears, and they'll go and buy a couple of these peanut butter jars, and then at the end of the summer they'll go back to register their gold with peanut butter jars that have been eaten but filled up with little gold flakes, and that's how they would register their claim and go back and be big ballers in Berlin for the rest of the year.
And I love too how it wasn't like she wasn't like, oh yeah, like my friend told me or anything like that. She was like, no, yeah, I worked in the claims office for the government. Mm-hmm. She was like, I worked there for like 10 years just recording all the claims of individuals that would come in with gold, because I guess if you take it out of the territory, you have to stop by the recorder's office to record your claim. And she was like, yeah, I would write down everybody's claim, everybody that brought in gold. Just so wild. Sign me up, right?
Yeah, exactly. She also had some amazing stories going way back. She was Miss Yukon. I believe that she was Miss Yukon. And, she was trying to find pics on her phone, but she had to go scroll back to the 1970s. So we didn't have time for that. But, yeah, she was a cool lady. I mean, you just meet so many characters up there as well. So many people who've chosen a life. The guy who was taking garbage out of the campground that we ended up taking out of where did we take out? Remind me?
Carmax,
the guy at the campground there. He was from Greece. He was born in Greece. And I just want to say, let me hang out for a day and learn your story, because you came from Greece to Carmax in the Yukon territories. It's just an amazing breed of people who've chosen to be up there.
Oh, totally. Yeah. All kinds of interesting folk and a lot of just people from there, but also, yeah, a lot of like either outcast or like don't want to be found type folk, or like, just, yeah, want to be off the beaten path a little bit. Vagabond types as well. Interesting cats up there.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that I remember was doing like the wall rides. We come up on the boat, just like in the closest possible current seam to like a big, huge sand. I guess the best way to describe it would be like a sand bluff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like a massive sand bluff, like big, and you're going right up next to it, and all of these little rocks and pebbles are eroding off of this sand dune, like right in the water next to you. If your boat was close enough, or the right rock came, you could, a little pebble would pop right into your boat. I always thought that was fun. We did that a couple times.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that as well. And just thinking about how erosion sometimes is sort of a dirty word of human encroachment on natural territories. But this has been happening for millions of years and will continue to happen. And these rocks and pebbles and sand trails are falling down this thing day and night. And every once in a while we saw that tree, a big clump of pine trees fell off, splashed into the water. And it's just happening all the time. I mean, it's still so wild and just alive out there. It was a cool reminder of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about the tree that fell in, we were like the whole time we'd been like trying to, and the whole time after that too, we continued to, but trying to like pontificate about different like wilderness scenarios. For instance, like there'd be trees down the slope and we'd be like, oh, I wonder if it was a mudslide or erosion, or if there was a fire here, or there was a lot of peculiar trees that were snapped in interesting places, like 2/3 of the way up. So we're like, oh, it must have been a windstorm or whatever. But we were doing that all, the entire trip in all kinds of different scenarios. But seeing that group of pine trees slide off of the edge of one of these sandstone bluffs and then roll down into the river, I was like, both of our boats, we had 2 canoes on the trip, but we were like kind of rafted up. And I remember I didn't even know what was going on, but I just saw the reaction on Michael's face as Michael saw what was happening. And instantly, like, you see somebody's reaction like that. He was just like, oh my God. And you automatically just like look to where he's looking. And I just caught like the tail half of it, that massive group of like 3 full mature pine trees sliding down that ridge into the river's edge. Pretty wild.
Yeah, that was incredible. And then later that day, I believe, I heard a splash that reminded me. I turned over and there was a bald eagle climbing out of the river. And we were trying to look at it. You ran and got the binoculars and we're like, oh, I think he missed his fish. I think he missed it. And then we see him flying away 2 or 3 minutes later. And it turns out, I think he was just on the shore choking out that fish for the last 2 or 3 minutes. It was kind of messed up, but he got his meal and he flew away, and we were watching on the binoculars, watching him, have his little dinner. So it was, the eagles were pretty cool to see up there.
Bald eagles got to eat, man.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
We saw the wildlife. We did not see as much as I would have hoped. However, the bald eagles were, there was, I think the first day I was counting and I got to like 15 or 16 within like the first day or half day or something like that. And it's like, all right, I'm going to stop counting now.
Yeah. And they were big and they did not care about us. We were paddling up. I mean, we were sort of floating up because you didn't actually need to paddle because the way the river was moving. And we were floating up to them and they would just let you float on by and kind of give you this side-eye glance like, are you a threat? No, you're definitely not a threat. And then they just do their thing. So, those beautiful birds. That was really lucky to see.
Did you have do you have a favorite campsite that comes to mind? I think I know, but just curious.
Yeah, we had this one campsite. Was it Walsh Creek? Is that the name of that creek? Yeah, so it was on a point. We were at a bend in the river, and then the Walsh Creek coming in behind the campsite. So we got to cook out by Yukon River and camp over by Walsh Creek. So we were just sort of on this peninsula thing. And then in the morning, we got to hike up one of those sandstones and ridges that you were mentioning earlier. So it was hard to get view of the river above because anywhere you'd stop, there were so many trees. It was so thick you couldn't walk. So there was a little knife ridge that we climbed up and went up there and, took our coffee cups up, and it was a little sketchy to climb because you're basically against this sheer wall where we had seen trees fall off the previous day. But it was just beautiful up there to get a little view of the bend in the river and just sort of see how this thing was snaking and carving its way through the Yukon territories.
Yeah, no doubt. That was my favorite too. And like you said, the coolest parts were, it was just right at the perfect point where the creek, and we say creek, but it was actually like, at least at these water levels.
Huge.
Yeah, it was like
it was huge.
It was what we would call a river here. Yeah, it was a big river. It was not like a tiny.
You'd call it a lake in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It was big.
Yeah, exactly. But that were where that came in and then where it met the Yukon, it was just like, yeah, different color waters, which I always love. I always pointed out on that because I don't know, I find that interesting, the mixing, like the confluences of waters, where like one colored water meets another and you can see all the mixing of the colors and different sediment and all kinds of cool stuff. But yeah, that campsite in particular, positioned right on that point, water all around, plenty of wood, good like dispersed trees, so you had some cover, but it wasn't it wasn't like overbearing or overburdensome. Yeah, great campsite.
Yeah, when you mentioned the colors of the water, that's something that you did really well on this trip, was being aware of all the different rivers that flow into the Yukon and how the river is growing and changing slightly, but dramatically over the course of the trip, as you take in the Teslin and the Little Salmon, and the water color changes because of the different sediments. So you definitely added value to the trip by just sharing that with us, because you can't really feel it, at least to me, I couldn't really feel it. When you said, oh, we're coming up to the confluence of the Teslin, I thought, there was going to be a rip-roaring river pouring in or something like that. But no, I wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't said, look over your right shoulder, and sure enough, it's a fork in the river if you're going that way. So that was really cool that you brought that information into the trip. And along those lines as well, the history up there, I was not aware of at all. And that was something that you really brought to the trip and made sure that, we got to sort of hear about some of the stories of the gold rush and the big old stern wheelers that were steaming up and down the Yukon River. That was very fantastic to think about.
Yeah, no doubt. I completely agree. And it's just kind of a wild, I think it's awesome for anywhere, but especially for that trip in particular. The history is just so interesting and unique with the gold rush and the First Nations people there before and during, and the wilderness aspect to it. And yeah, we saw, what would have been day 3 maybe, I think it was day 3 when we saw the beached old sternwheeler. It was like a massive boat that was used in the late 1800s to traverse to carry cargo for the miners up the Yukon. And it's hard to fathom. Like you say, there's this big wood sternwheeler, but like standing next to it and seeing the scale and the planks of this thing and the boiler that it used to burn wood to go, it's like, it's just a different scale, and just like a different, like being face to face with that, like this is what they used to traverse this river, for this gold rush. It's just crazy.
Yeah, the sheer size of it, the fact that you could still push on the rudder and it's still moving, that thing was, it was just sitting there in the middle of an island, and you could really sort of take a look at it and see what it was like for these people to be out here in the middle of the woods, just cruising up and down the river on this thing. And what a hardy bunch they must have been, because, they didn't have all the technology and the Gore-Tex and the bug nets that we had. They were just out there trying to make a buck. And that boat sitting on an island with no one else around, great signs to teach you about it. They did that really well. I mean, but that was one of the most memorable experiences as well. It's definitely one that I tell people about is the stern wheelers up and down the Yukon River, taking people to gold mining camps and back to the cities. That was very, very cool.
Yeah, awesome. And this one is beached on the island because I want to say it was like 1904 when it was beached. Apparently it was beached still intact, and that they used that island as a shipyard. And apparently it was not constructed very well or something. There was a few issues with it. So then they beached it and just stripped it for parts throughout the years since then. But it's still just perfectly intact, more or less, from like a historical perspective. And yeah, just fascinating.
Yeah. And Anton walking all around it, trying to figure out a way up.
He was
he could have climbed up, but he knew he wasn't supposed to climb up, but it was they didn't on the thing, but it was there perfectly preserved to check out.
Did you pick up any tips or tricks or any useful things for future camping trips that you learned from anybody?
For sure. The rubber boots that you told us to bring was key. For, morning dew, which there wasn't really that, but just wading in the river and getting water and those
Dishes.
little missions. Those little missions you need to do when you should get your feet wet, but if you have dry shoes on, you're doing this weird bend out over the river, holding on to some brush nearby and trying not to fall in. You just stick your feet in the water and you come out with nice dry feet, which are so important at night when you're camping. So that was key. I was not as expert as you were, Will. Me and Anton couldn't quite figure out how to paddle a full day and keep water out of the boots. So that's next level.
Yeah, it's taken me quite some time. You'll get there, young grasshopper. But it's a delicate balance because the rubber boots are like the greatest tool to canoeing, and camping in general, but canoeing especially. I just absolutely love them because, like you said, keep your feet dry. If it's raining, a stormy day, put your rain pants over them, keep them dry all day. Hop in and out of the boat, keep them dry. You can wear wool socks when you're canoeing. But the caveat is that if you get water over the tops of the boots when you're in the water, like getting in or out of the canoe, they take forever to dry, and you need at least like 24 hours. And it sucks if you get them wet, and it happens all the time. Yeah, like you said, hopping out of the front of the boat, or you accidentally like bend down, and your boot gives an inch, and all of a sudden you're taking on water. It's the worst. Mm-hmm. But I've had plenty of boots, full wet boots, in order to get to my sensei level of dry feet. Yeah. Clearly you've practiced. One of the other things, we set up a tarp one night. It rained a little bit that night, but it was mostly just for fun. And you were teaching us the paddle trick to keep instead of staking right down to the ground or tying off to a tree, using a paddle to elevate the ends of the corners of the tarp. I'm embarrassed to say I never learned that one before in all my years of canoe camping, but I thought it was going to be really complicated. Like you have to tie some incredible knot, or it'll slip down the paddle, or the paddle won't stay in place. But sure enough, with enough tension, you just stick that paddle blade in the ground. Of course, plastic paddles, we're not using nice woodies for this. They just hold that tarp up real nice and tight, and you've got a much more livable space up there. So that was another great trick that I picked up on the journey. Yeah, it just gives you a little more elevation when setting up the tarp or whatever, but mostly tarp. But you could use paddle, twig, log, whatever it is. But that is a good one. I would have to agree. Okay, one more. I got to shout out Anton. We would get to these sites, and they were established campsites, which is great up there, because if they weren't established, you'd be bushwhacking and you'd be like camping on top of like a downed tree or something like that. So the established sites were definitely what we were looking for. And he would get to the campsite and he would see the fire pit and he'd say, man, we can do better than this. So he would dig out the fire pit, go bury the old ashes, set up the new rocks. And we were, cooking over these beautiful new fire rings that he created, and also leaving those behind for the next group that would come along. So that was just something that didn't take that much time, and that was another Anton mission that he took on for himself. But it really did make the experience better to have a nice, beautiful ring that you're cooking over and hanging out with. Oh, totally. I totally agree. It's one of the best things about camping is cooking over the fire, hanging out around the fire after a long day or short day. But just hanging out around the fire, shooting the breeze, telling stories. Just being in the woods, watching the stars, or watching the sunset or whatever it is, sitting around the fire. And it was great. It was like perfectly on cue, because we'd gone to a couple campsites, like you said, too, where wood had, like somebody before us had cut up some wood and left like logs or with a chainsaw or whatever it may be. And so we were burning a lot of those. And I remember specifically, I was like, man, we're using a lot of wood from other people. At some point here, we gotta leave some of these campsites significantly better than when we got here to kind of give our karma back, And as soon as I said that, Anton was like almost at the same time, like working on improving the fire ring at the campsite that we were at. And yeah, he just crushed it. It was just like this, before it was like kind of a hodgepodge. It's full of ash that, people had used for however long before. And yeah, he dug it all out, built a perfect fire ring. And yeah, it was great. And how about cooking over the fire, huh? It's just, there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it. Again, Southern California, you don't have open fires. Maybe in one of these, campgrounds that's really just a glorified parking lot, they'll allow you to have fires. But out in the wilderness here, you can't have fires because it's so easy to start a wildfire. Up there, there's a whole lot more water. There's, it's raining there basically every day or every other day. It's going to rain on most of that land. So it's a lot safer. And so I was nervous going up there that, are we going to be cooking over a stove the whole time? It's still great. You're still outside. You're still cooking. But cooking over a fire, we started the first few days, we should boil the water for coffee on the stove because that'll be faster. And then day 3, we abandoned that because, 1, it wasn't really faster. And 2, it's just so joyful to cook over a fire. There's really, in my opinion, nothing like it in the world. Just that connection with where heat really comes from. And so we were all good at it from our foundation of going on camp trips when we were kids. So, we go collect firewoods, and Anton would build a fire ring and build up a nice roaring little twiggy fire that hit the heat directly on the bottom of that coffee pot. And it's just a special, that made for some good pictures too. Campfire pictures with the river in the background. It's beautiful to see, and it translates on the photos as well.
Oh, absolutely. And with the little kettle, the little blue coffee kettle on top.
So
it's
classic.
Like, just as classic as could be.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So what, looking back on the trip, what, is there anything, we talked about stuff that you learned and such and stuff that I've learned, but is there anything that you're, larger scale have taken away after this trip, after being away from the woods for, more or less for some time and then doing this trip? Like, how has anything, I don't know, not changed, that seems too big, right? But is there any like little thing that's different after this trip, or it was just an awesome trip and you would do it again, but that's it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things for sure. I mean, the biggest one that I haven't told a lot of people, but I've told what I consider camping people, is that it sparked the fire again.
Nice.
So you can get, I can get in this mode where, again, back to the routine, you're going about your life and it's good and you're comfortable and you've got your nice place to live and go to work and go out to dinner, whatever. It's not as magical. It's not magical in the way that you can get from wilderness experiences. So having that fire spark to go out and say, I need to do it again. And I need to do it again soon to keep this momentum going. So you and I have already been talking about the next Buffalo Roamer trip to Moab in October, and I'm in.
Awesome.
Because it's, one, you make it easy by doing the legwork with the logistics, and 2, it's just, I need to keep it going because it's so enriching to my life to be out in the woods and have these experiences away from your cell phone and away from the constant distractions of our modern lives, and just to get out there and have this full, got to get from A to B today, and the rest of it is, whatever we make of it. So that's something that is just really on my mind now, coming back from the trip and not letting that slip away.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. I'm pumped for the Moab trip. It's going to be another epic one, a little shorter in days, which is, going to be nice as well, but it's going to be epic. I can't wait. I'm already excited for that one. So yeah, that one's going to be a blast, and I'm right there with you. Yeah, it's it's like working out for me. It's the same type of thing. Like, it's always like tough to, not always, but sometimes it's tough to convince yourself like, I gotta load the boat up, load the canoe up, or load the surfboard up, or pack my foldable kayak in the back of my car, or whatever it is. I gotta drive and do this, blah blah blah. But like we said at the start, every time you do it, I'm always happy with it, and yeah. I'm pumped that the Buffalo Roamer trip worked out, that we had such a great crew and such a great time, and you're rocking and rolling for the next Buffalo Roamer trip, so we're only going to have more from here, man.
Absolutely. The other thing that's been on my mind a lot is the book that you brought by Robert Service, a poet that had spent a lot of time up in that land, up in Yukon in the early 1900s, the gold rush years.
Yeah, the gold rush was like I want to say it was like 1898 is when it kind of started, and then it went to like 1910-ish. Yeah.
So just being there, and we would get up most mornings or evenings and read a couple of his poems. Would share readings from. We did a couple throughout the trip, and we had a few hits that we would return to. The Rhyme of the Remittance Man was my favorite, and Sam McGee, The Cremation of Sam McGee, and just reading this man's words from over a century ago, but he was experiencing the same place in the same way, essentially the same way, because it hasn't changed all that much.
Yeah. Because
the river's still there and the woods are still there in the same way. It's really connects you to the place, and a poetic genius like him that just has the right words to sum it up and to preach these lessons about this is why you go, this is why you sacrifice to get out of there, because people are curious why you're doing this. Why aren't you going to a beach in Mexico? Why aren't you going to an all-inclusive resort for your vacation where you can be pampered and sit by the pool and get a massage, have unlimited food and drink? Well, it's because it's magical. And he really sums it up. And I immediately got home. I think it was even at the airport before I got home that I went and bought that same book that you had, some collection of his poetries from the time he spent up there. And that was super memorable. And, I have the book and I'm going to keep it with me.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. And it's kind of the same thing happened to me, actually, when I first heard about Robert Service on the Yukon when I was first up there in 2018. Another guy was like reading poems from it, and I was so taken by it. He gave me the copy, actually, from the one that I was reading from up there. But yeah, I mean, there's two things to that. One, Robert Service is just like, oof, I mean, just absolutely knocks it out of the park as far as the wilderness and kind of outdoorsy literature. I mean, it's just like pulling at the heartstrings. And then two, there's something magical about reading that stuff in, like you said, in the place where it happened. I think I'm going to try and do more of that going forward, is like pairing literature or like history with the area that you're at, because it's so cool and can be so enriching. And especially, I mean, Robert Service makes it easy, right? I mean, just like, it's like, just butter on a page. I don't know, that's a weird description, but it's just, his words are just so smooth. And I agree. That was great. And I was super pumped that everybody took to it as well, because you never know. It could be weird busting out poetry, in front of a bunch of random guys, but the setting was just perfect, and he's an amazing author. So that I agree, that was special.
Dudes love poetry. Dude just can't get enough poetry. Doing the snaps. I remember Michael when he first read The Cremation of Sam McGee the first time. He's like, man, I just love a poem that feels good on your tongue as you're saying it. The words feel good to get out, because he was such a mastermind. I think that's part of a camping thing too. People let down their guard because you're just so far removed from the pressures of civilization, and you're out there with this group doing funky stuff, sleeping on the ground, and getting more primitive. It's not exactly primitive, but way more than what we're used to. So I think people let their guard down and just do what feels right, and that definitely felt right.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's one of the reasons that I particularly love going into these places. I keep saying the woods, however you want to call it, right? The woods, the mountains, the backcountry, the bush, whatever your preferred, term is, just away, the wilderness, I just lost my thought now, Doug. Where was I going with that?
Letting your guard down.
Oh,
just
yes,
getting out there and
yeah, letting your guard down. Thank you. Is that the river doesn't care. It's like the wilderness. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're CEO of Fortune 500 company. It doesn't care if you're homeless. It doesn't care if you're somewhere in between. Or like how much you know about the woods, how little you know about the woods, how many times you've been on a trip. It's like it doesn't care. All it matters is like what you contribute, like how you go about your day, like how you mitigate the different things that Mother Nature and the woods are going to throw at you. And yeah, I think it's just like you get it's very simple but also rewarding in that you kind of get what you put into these types of trips, Like if you're not willing to be prepared or go the extra step or set up your tent right when you get into camp, well, then you might get rained on and you might, have a wet tent or whatever it might be. But it's just like, I don't know. That's one of the things I like. The river doesn't care. It just is,
Yeah, it's not that hard. Going camping is not that hard. It's probably 10% a little bit of knowledge about what you do, how to set up a tent, how to cook over a fire and gather firewood, and the other 90% is just your attitude. And if you go out there and say, all right, it's gonna rain, it's definitely gonna rain in the next 8 days, and that's totally fine. Like we have rain gear, we know what to do. It's going to be cool. And you just don't let it get to you. Easier said than done at certain times and certain moments, but it's really just about having the right attitude, and then it's all gravy from there.
Yeah, 100%. Doug, man, I'm going to wind this down. It's been a lot of fun talking about the trip. You got any other thoughts or caveats to toss in there?
No, not too much. Just you did a great job, Will. I mean, I've seriously been dreaming about this kind of thing for over a decade, to get back out there and do something epic. And you just made it easy. And that's why I went. And, that's why I'm looking forward to more. So I can't wait for the next one.
I love it, man. I appreciate it. That means a lot. And that's the whole thing with that I'm trying to do with these trips is, lots of people have asked me, how can I join you or how can I do stuff like that? And, these trips are not something that if you have some determination, some knowledge, and some, whatever it is, like you could plan this trip. You could, any of us could have totally planned this trip and done it. But yeah, the nice part about the Buffalo Roamer trips is you don't have to. All you have to do is say yes and show up, and you're going to have an experience of a lifetime. So I think it's got some legs, and I'm pumped, looking forward to our Moab trip, and staying in touch after 14 years. All it takes is 8 days in the woods to reconnect, right?
It's as easy as that. I can't wait, Will. Thanks a lot for having me on.
You bet. And there you have it. Episode 51 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors with Doug Young is in the books. Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast if you enjoyed it. Also, if that trip sounds like something that might be up your alley, if you'd like to join us on a future trip similar to that, buffaloroamer.com is a good place to start, or email me at buffaloroamer@yahoo.com. Take it easy, get some fresh air, get outside, and we'll talk to you next time.